If you're a One Piece fan, you've probably heard a Buggy joke before. Maybe you've even made one yourself. Buggy D Clown, strongest man in the world, future king of the pirates, long-lost relative of Down D Stairs, Con D Oriano, and Gas T Dino, and genius billionaire playboy. I'm not surprised. He's the king of comedic relief in a story full of comedic relief characters. I mean, he's a literal clown. But what impresses me the most about Buggy is not his humor, but how this humor is achieved, and by extension, how he has become so successful. What makes Buggy truly special is his inhuman degree of luck. No matter how bad the situation gets for the Clown Prince, he always manages to come out the other side with some kind of victory. Even though he repeatedly fails, he somehow manages to improve his standing in the world. Most people refer to this as failing upwards. It's the ultimate circus act. If Buggy was an RPG character, he'd have put all his stat points into luck and charisma, and 0 points into anything else. But you know, that can actually be a good thing. If I was caught and sent to Impel Down, I'd rather be incredibly lucky than incredibly strong. But how far will Buggy's luck go? He went from nobody pirate to warlord, from warlord to emperor, and now he's announced he wants to go claim the One Piece treasure for himself. So, the big question is, where does the gag end? Will he go from emperor to pirate king? Who knows? No, not that nose, Buggy. Please stop. I didn't mean it. Have mercy. Welcome to the Hidden Island. Take a seat, grab a drink, and sit back while we take a look at Roger's lesser-known apprentice. Today, we'll be trying to figure out where Buggy is originally from, who Buggy's parents are, and where his journey will ultimately take him. So enjoy the show, and don't forget to subscribe for more. Did you know that Buggy changes his clown makeup 5 times over the course of the story? Well, technically 4. He almost treats it like changing his clothes. He starts out in the Orangetown arc with these crossbones painted on his forehead and some blue lines going through his eyes. Then in Logetown, he changes it up with these green crescents and a cross on his head. During the Jaya arc, when he meets Ace, he goes with green dots instead, a look I'm particularly a fan of. In Impel Down, he reprises his makeup from Orangetown, except this time the lines going through his eyes are a light red. And after the time skip, he goes back to the Orangetown makeup completely. And unfortunately, post-time skip, we haven't seen Buggy change it up yet. He has had some different non-canon appearances. In One Piece Stampede, he decided to go with blonde hair. I don't know if that's his natural color or what's up with that. And if you're dying for more Buggy action, he was in that one cup noodle commercial cosplaying as the Joaquin Phoenix Joker. Speaking of, the One Piece live-action Buggy seems to be taking some notes from the Joker too. And this is no coincidence. Just take a look at one of Oda's early concept sketches of Buggy, who, at the time, he planned to call Boogie. Yeah, Boogie. I can see why Oda went with the other guy. And who the fuck is that? Is that Richie? We've come a long way. Why am I telling you all this? Because it's cool. But also to help illustrate that Buggy has gone through a lot of changes over the years, especially when compared to his concept art, and even when compared to his story introduction. He started out as a much more cartoonishly evil character, felt a lot more like a flavor of the weak villain, and despite all the credit I give Oda for planning things out, I don't personally think he planned for Buggy to become an emperor way back when. At the very least, it wasn't in the cards until around chapter 200, when he dropped the cover of volume 25, which depicts the future Yonko front and center in the same order they're announced to us after Wano. Pretty cool, but maybe it's a case of just retroactive foreshadowing. Either way, for a while Buggy was nothing more than a running joke in the story with minimal relevance to the larger plot. Right? I don't know. For a minute, let's play devil's advocate and take the other side of this debate. Maybe Buggy always was meant to be important. Buggy was the first Devil Fruit user besides Luffy to be introduced to us in the story, Not only that, but his devil fruit is effectively the exact opposite of Luffy's. Luffy's fruit allows him to stretch, and Buggy's fruit lets him split apart. And not splitting apart is basically the entire point of rubber. As a result, Luffy is immune to blunt damage, but especially weak to things that cut, while Buggy is immune to cutting damage and susceptible to blunt damage instead. Buggy names his moves after cannons, and Luffy names his after guns. Buggy even uses his fruit in wacky ways, in a weird way, almost like Gear 5 would. For example, turning himself into a car. Even more interesting is that both characters ate their devil fruits accidentally, in part because of Shanks. Luffy ate his fruit because Shanks effectively brought it to him, and Buggy ate his because Shanks surprised him. Makes you wonder if that was also on purpose. Even the context for both is inverted. Luffy wanted to eat the fruit but didn't know it was a devil fruit, while Buggy knew his was a devil fruit and explicitly didn't want to eat his. Shanks gives Luffy his hat, which he later considers a treasure, and Shanks causes Buggy to lose his treasure map, essentially denying Buggy his treasure. As a result, one character idolizes Shanks and the other is a bona fide hater. Buggy is designed in a lot of ways to be a contrast to Luffy. Moreover, he doesn't lose relevance after he's defeated, unlike pretty much every other East Blue villain. He's actually the focus of the first ever cover story in One Piece, and then he comes back officially in Logtown with a vengeance. It wasn't just Luffy on Roger's execution stand, but Buggy too. And if it weren't for that bolt of lightning, he probably would have successfully ended Luffy's adventure right there. Even after they hit the Grand Line, Buggy still gets panel time, meeting Ace and looking for Captain John's treasure, and later running into Luffy a third time in Impel Down. The point I'm trying to make is that Oda has always made Buggy out to be more important than many of the other antagonists. Who would have thought that Buggy would outlast people like Doflamingo and Big Mom and Kaido? That he'd become an emperor himself, working together with Crocodile and Mihawk? If you would have told me this 10 years ago, I would have never believed you. So if we follow the pattern, it's only natural to expect that Oda still has more big plans in store for him. And what are those plans? This is the toughest part to figure out in my opinion, because the only way up from Yonko status is to become Pirate King or something, right? And you, me, and probably everyone else are fully expecting Luffy to become Pirate King by the end. As a matter of fact, I probably wouldn't accept any alternative. And I'll tell you right now, this is not a Buggy Pirate King theory. I just don't think that's gonna happen. This also isn't a theory about how Buggy's fruit is actually a mythical zone or something. While Buggy has gotten lucky before, there is a trend in how he does it, and it doesn't involve ancient deities or actual, tangible, incredible power. Buggy is not really the best fighter or the best tactician, he just kinda happens to get really lucky all the time. And look no further than his base of operations, Karai Barito, known in English as Empty Bluffs Island. Everything Buggy has done to become successful has been built on empty bluffs, lies about his strength and grandeur that his optimistic followers eat up like candy. Yes, Buggy was once on the Roger Pirates. Yes, Buggy is a Yonko now. Yes, Buggy has Crocodile and Mihawk in his crew. But all these things need to be listed with a big fat asterisk next to them because they aren't to be taken at face value. Buggy was a cabin boy on Roger's crew, didn't go to Laugh Tale, and wasn't much of a fighter. Buggy is a Yonko now, but only because of the people in his crew and their actions, and because a spot opened up in the roster, no thanks to Buggy's efforts, and not because Buggy is a massive threat or could take on an actual emperor himself. Buggy has Crocodile and Mihawk on his crew, but they're effectively holding him hostage and running the crew in his place, despite the advertisements for the Cross Guild implying otherwise. Empty bluffs. If you were to meet Buggy and hear all these things, you'd probably be impressed, but if you were to dig beneath the surface for a minute, you'd realize this man is bullshitting. A regular Slippin' Jimmy. In other words, Buggy's modus operandi is fake it till you make it. So in some way, if Buggy were to accomplish his new goal of finding the One Piece, it would have to be in a way that can be considered, what's the word? Oh yeah, fraudulent. So how would that be accomplished? How could Buggy simultaneously achieve his goal without actually finding the One Piece and becoming Pirate King? In my opinion, this could be done by Buggy finding a treasure he thinks is the One Piece, but isn't actually. The characters in the story are just as much in the dark about the treasure as we are. They have no idea what it is. Buggy was on Roger's crew, but didn't go with them to Laugh Tale because he was sick, so Buggy probably doesn't know either. He probably expects it to be a massive amount of gold or a hoard of wealth, just like all the other treasure he sought out in the story. Most pirates probably expect the One Piece to just be a large amount of gold or something. That treasure map he found as a kid and Captain John's treasure. For him, he wants to find these things and become rich. Luffy doesn't care about that stuff by contrast. Luffy doesn't really care what the treasure is, period. For him, the journey there and the sense of adventure is more important than the reward. And since he already has a head start on the road poneglyphs, I think this is what will happen. Luffy gets to Laugh Tale first. It's full of all kinds of wealth and valuables, and among that treasure, Luffy finds the One Piece, and then is capable of using it or taking it with him, and due to urgency or some other factors, leaves the rest of the typical treasure behind on the island. Assuming Buggy's proclamation becomes a reality, and the Cross Guild does make it to Laugh Tale somehow, and assuming Buggy doesn't become sick again once they get there, I'm expecting him to find some kind of treasure hoard, filled with jewels, gold, etc., which Luffy left behind, and I expect Buggy to mistakenly claim this treasure to be the One Piece. All of his subordinates would believe him, maybe with the exception of Crocodile and Mihawk, and Buggy leaves the island a very, very rich man, believing he successfully accomplished what Roger did and got to the treasure first, finders keepers and all that. Maybe even paying off his debt to Crocodile and gaining the reputation of being a great pirate in the process. Would this make him Pirate King? No, since Luffy would have gotten there first, and likely later on would use the One Piece treasure somehow or reveal it to the world, making him the Pirate King officially. Despite his victory being somewhat hollow, Buggy would still come out of this a winner, having accomplished his goals in a roundabout way. He still would have successfully reached Laugh Tale just like the first Pirate King, and he still would have found an incredible treasure, becoming filthy rich like he always wanted. His crew would probably still view him as the Pirate King anyway, since they have such an incredible bias towards him, even if the world at large does not. Here's an alternative scenario, scratch everything I just said. What if the Cross Guild were to make it to Laugh Tale, but just like last time he was here, Buggy falls ill again for reasons we don't yet know? Maybe it's an actual disease, maybe it's cowardice, but something prevents him from landing on the island once again. I think it might be something else, but we'll get to that later. Knowing how Buggy's crew twists every act of cowardice, incompetence, and trickery into something positive and praiseworthy, they would likewise take this failure of his and make it out to be an honorable or laudable act. I can hear it now. Oh, Captain Buggy, he has such a good heart. He knows that if we find this great treasure, it would be so great that our greed would pit us against each other. The thought of us turning brother on brother, turning against our Nakama is making him sick. He's such a great leader. Captain Buggy. Something like that, at least. I don't know what excuse these idiots will come up with, but you get the idea. In both situations, however, Buggy does reach the island, and I do think he will reach the island. He does complete Roger's journey just like he wanted all those years ago, but the only difference is he doesn't actually find the One Piece. Whether he walks away with gold, honor, or both is up in the air. Maybe he walks away with none, but I think that he will, in some way, fail to find Roger's treasure while still living up to his legacy symbolically. Knowing how being a fraud is such a consistent part of his character, I think it would make a lot of sense for him to either mistake the wrong treasure for the One Piece, or make up a reason for why he doesn't want to approach the island, all while still making the journey there like he said he would, and while his crew praises him for his shortcomings. But this isn't the real revelation to be had with Buggy at the end of the story. I think this is only a small part of his climactic finale. The real kicker lies not in his future, but in his past. As of film read and recent developments in the story, specifically regarding God Valley and the Figarland family, it's become pretty heavily implied that Shanks is the abandoned child of Garling, and that after the God Valley incident, the Roger Pirates encountered a baby Shanks there and adopted him as part of the crew. So great, now we have a rough origin for Shanks. That explains why the Roger Pirates had a kid for a cabin boy. One problem. Buggy is the same age as Shanks, and we have absolutely no idea where this kid came from. The only times a child has been on board the Oro Jackson is when the crew has no other choice but to take them. Shanks was practically orphaned with nowhere else to go. Hiyori was born on the ship, and Momo was brought along because he was likewise born while Odin was at sea. So what reason would they have to bring Buggy along? Well, he doesn't seem to have any parents, so he must have been an orphan like Shanks. Matter of fact, think of any major character in One Piece and there's a good chance they were also orphaned as children. Basically, all the Straw Hats grew up without parents. Dragon was an absent father and Luffy's mom is totally unknown. Zoro was an orphan living at the dojo. Sanji was a runaway child disowned by his father. Nami was found as an orphan and later made an orphan again. Usopp was an orphan. Chopper was abandoned by his parents for his nose. Robin was an orphan as well. Frankie was abandoned by his parents before Tom found him. The list can go on with other characters. Doflamingo killed his father. Yamato disowned Kaido. Momo's parents died at a young age. Ace's parents died at a young age. So did Kuma's parents. So did Law's parents. So did Kid's parents. Sabo disowned his family and ran away. All the Yonko, Big Mom, Whitebeard, Kaido, Blackbeard, and Shanks were all orphans. Does Kobe have parents? Where are they? Where are Boa's parents? See what I mean? It's one of the most frequently recurring elements, if not the single most recurring element in any One Piece character's backstory. If you have a One Piece character, 9 times out of 10, they don't have any parents or their parents die somewhere in their past. The only explanation left that could explain Buggy's presence on the Roger Pirates is that he was found as an orphan and brought onto the crew as a child or even a baby. And if Shanks has parents that we get to learn about now through the Celestial Dragons, then Buggy should be offered a similar courtesy. So where did they find Buggy? And who were his parents? This is not something I can really answer confidently, but I'm going to try. The first thing we gotta mention is that Buggy and Shanks are the same age, 39 years old, with Shanks being a few months older than Buggy. Shanks was born on March 9th, and Buggy was born on August 8th. Side note, Buggy's birthday is probably a pun, since 8 in Japanese is Hachi, which can be shortened to Ha in some cases, making his birthday, 8-8, a pun, readable as ha ha. Get it? He's a clown. Anyway, the God Valley incident happened 38 years ago, making Shanks just about a year old when he was found and adopted by Roger. But Buggy is 39 and likely wasn't found at God Valley, so at what point was he brought onto the ship? Let's take a look at the One Piece timeline and see if anything interesting happened 39 years ago, 1 year before God Valley. And believe it or not, something did. 39 years ago, the Roger Pirates first arrived at Lodestar Island, the last island mapped on the Grand Line, or at least one would think before learning about the existence of Laugh-Tale. So maybe, just maybe, Buggy the Star Clown was found at Lodestar Island. This could offer an interesting correlation between Buggy's nature and the nature of Lodestar, since as we discussed before, Buggy is a man full of empty bluffs. He gives off this impression of greatness when in reality he's only putting on an act and imitating actual great pirates. Lodestar is a lot like this. It is, at least at first glance, the last island on the Grand Line, the last island in one's journey before one realizes there's actually a true final island beyond. Lodestar is essentially a false Laugh-Tale in this way, a misleading destination, just like Buggy is a misleading, borderline fraudulent emperor and potentially a false pirate king. The real Pirate King will be Luffy, of course, and Buggy will only attempt to imitate that greatness for himself, just like how Roger thought Lodestar was the end of his journey before realizing there was actually a step higher he could climb. Lodestar itself is an empty bluff, and if Buggy was originally from there, it would not only match up with the timeline, but match his character in a very poetic fashion. What makes this really cool to me is that it could also offer some explanation as to why Buggy became sick when he finally got to Laugh-Tale. Maybe there's something about the residents or people of Lodestar or anyone born there that is unknowingly connected to Laugh-Tale, given that Lodestar is the island that reveals Laugh-Tale's very existence. I mean, it's even named Lodestar, as in the North Star, the thing that all navigators in the past used as a reference point for navigation. Also consider that lodestones are naturally occurring magnets. It was the discovery of lodestone that led to the discovery of magnetism and the development of the first compasses. Considering that all the log poses eventually lead to Lodestar at the end of the Grand Line, that would imply that the island has a very strong and influential magnetic field, since all compasses eventually point there. Maybe it's an island full of lodestone. On an island like this, could the people who grow up there possibly have bodies conditioned to this magnetism in some way? I know it doesn't work like this in real life, but maybe the iron in their blood is affected somehow by the magnetism, and if so, what happens when a person like this approaches an island like Laughtail, a place effectively invisible to log poses, a place where the magnetism flips out and makes the needles go crazy, spinning around in all directions? If someone's body was specially conditioned to a certain degree of magnetism, maybe approaching the island of Laughtail would throw their bodies out of whack and make them turn very ill. To build on this further, and here's a fun idea, maybe the magnetism of this island causes blood to be pulled to their extremities, for example, your nose. Maybe the blood in Buggy's body, which was adapted to the magnetism of his homeland, became concentrated in his nose, giving him that signature look. In a way, ironically turning him into a figurative compass, with his incredible luck always pulling him in the direction of Laughtail, no matter how hard he fails on the way there. Buggy wouldn't know about this since he probably has no memory of where he came from, having been adopted at a very young age, and so to him, his nose is just a random abnormality that he's self-conscious about. But in reality, it actually tells us something about where he's from. The next question that naturally follows is, what about Buggy's parents? Who are they? In my opinion, there are two options, with one being much more significant to the actual plot than the other. Option number one, Buggy's parents aren't important and just happen to be residents of Lodestar who, through some set of circumstances, passed away when he was a baby. I wouldn't mind this because I feel like not every character needs to have some famous, legendary figure for a parent, but as far as Endgame One Piece is concerned, this is rather anticlimactic and not really worth saving as a secret reveal for 1100 plus chapters. Plus, if anyone's going to be related to someone famous, it feels like it should be Buggy because he keeps, by sheer circumstance, having these weird relations to ultra-famous, ultra-powerful pirates. It would just follow the pattern that Buggy is also somehow related to someone incredibly famous. So, option number two, and I think this one is a lot more fun to consider, Buggy's father is Rox B. Xebec. I actually had a great conversation with Dak Sake about this possibility, link in the description, you should check it out, and during our conversation we talked about the possibility that Rox had been to Lodestar as well. Why do we say that? Because in chapter 1096, when Rox invades God Valley, we shortly after see Roger and his crew arrive there to meet him. But the interesting part is what Roger says upon landing. Quote, "It's been a whole year. Do you have any idea how I've felt all this time?" This quote heavily implies that the last time Roger and Rox had met and had a conflict was 1 year prior to God Valley, and as we've already established, Roger was at Lodestar 1 year before God Valley. So does that mean Roger and Rox had an encounter at Lodestar Island that we haven't heard about yet? I'm willing to say yes. Does this confirm Rox is Buggy's father? No, not at all. But the timeline works out surprisingly well, and if we run with the assumption that Buggy is Rox's child, a few puzzle pieces fall into place. For example, why has Rox been silhouetted all this time? If he isn't related to anyone important, or alternatively if he's Blackbeard's father or something, I don't see the need for keeping him silhouetted for hundreds of chapters. Why keep his face covered this far in? Since the chapter Rox was introduced as a character, everyone has since theorized that he's related to Blackbeard in some way. If Oda was trying to hide this fact, he's done a very poor job at it. It's probably one of the most popular theories out there. Since day one, people have immediately latched onto this line of thinking. It's so obvious, and I'd argue too obvious, too easy. No, I think Rox is being hidden from us because if we were to see what he really looked like, we'd be shocked to find that he doesn't resemble Blackbeard at all, but rather a completely different character, Buggy. Now, it would be weird if Rox had a clown nose and no one made the connection to Buggy this whole time, and so I think Rox doesn't have Buggy's nose, probably also because he's not a Lodestar native or whatever, but I think Rox does have long blue hair and similar facial features, maybe even a similar personality in some ways. Maybe Rox also tells people to die flashily and acts like a showman, a lot like his son. And in this case, Buggy's nose must have come from either his mother or as a consequence of being born on Lodestar Island. And credit to Dak here for mentioning this to me, but the last time we've seen a character with a very abnormal nose who acts in a surprisingly similar fashion to Buggy, he got that nose from his mother, not his father. Through some kind of confrontation on Lodestar, Buggy ended up being left behind as a baby, possibly even with his mother, and the abandoning of a child was something that Roger wouldn't stand for. Maybe it would even infuriate him, make Roger want to catch up to Rox and beat that ass, and thus the dialogue we have a year later. So, if Buggy's full name is actually Rox D. Buggy, let's talk about all the cool things this could imply for the story. 1. Buggy is actually a D. We've joked about it for years, but it may actually be truer than we thought. That would also make 3 of the 4 Yonko currently D-Clan members. Fitting that now at the end of the world, the D-Clan is suddenly showing up in great numbers to topple the hierarchy. 2. This would also mean that Roger adopted 2 children from 2 of his greatest enemies that he'd later fight at God Valley. He'd be raising the son of Rox and the son of Garling at the same time. Despite Rox, Garling, and Roger all fighting each other, their children grow up as friends and look up to Roger as a father figure. Instead of following in their parents' footsteps, Shanks and Buggy will live their lives in an attempt to carry on Roger's will instead of Garling and Rox's wills. Just another lesson to show that inherited will and family bonds go beyond blood relations. 3. It would put Buggy's search for Captain John's treasure in a new perspective. Captain John, a Rox pirate who hid a great fortune somewhere, is the focus of a lot of Buggy's travels in the first half of the story. Buggy goes to the Grand Line in search of that treasure and gets the treasure map from Luffy in Impel Down. Buggy is caught and sent to Impel Down in the first place while searching for this treasure. He believed he found the right location but was actually wrong. This place was a skull-shaped island, but apparently the wrong skull-shaped island. All this time later, and we now know that the Rox crew was established on Fullaled, an island also shaped like a skull, and most likely the actual location of Captain John's treasure. Since this island is Blackbeard's territory, Buggy probably can't go and claim it anymore, explaining why he hasn't mentioned the treasure in a long time. But after Blackbeard is gone, there's a chance Buggy will seize the opportunity to take over the island in his absence in order to finally get Captain John's loot, and by extension, takes over his father's home base in the process unknowingly. 4. That would also mean this encounter between Ace and Buggy is an ironic moment had between Roger and Rox's children, and it would also line up with Rox being Roger's greatest rival in a symbolic sense, because Roger's true successor, Luffy's first real opponent in the story after forming a crew, is Buggy. The person who Luffy meets first when breaking into Impel Down to save Ace is Buggy. The only other pirate to be elevated to Yonko status alongside Luffy is Buggy, and now Buggy is seeking the One Piece just like Luffy is. And finally 5, the Cross Guild, in a weird way, would be a repeat of the Rox pirates, with incredibly powerful figures working alongside Buggy without actually seeing him as a leader. We can kind of see something similar reflected in the God Valley flashback, where the crewmates don't really talk about Rox in a respectful way. If more warlords end up joining Cross Guild, then by sheer circumstance, Buggy has somehow amassed a crew as famous and threatening as his father before him. Once again, completely by accident. Mihawk mentioned in Marineford that Luffy has the uncanny and very dangerous ability to make allies wherever he goes. Well, Baby Rox here somehow does the same thing. He somehow turned every Impel Down escapee into a loyal worshiper of the Buggy Empire. They all revere him as a legend, as basically a pirate god, and even though we as readers know better than that, they can't seem to find any fault in him. And think about how they'd all react when hearing yet another fun fact about their great leader, that he's actually Rox's kid. They don't know the full story, but that's par for the course. It's all about looking good on the surface. That's the core of Buggy's fraudulent nature. Yeah, Buggy was only a cabin boy, but to the spectator, they only hear that he was once a Roger pirate. Yeah, they were only kids, but the crowd only cares that Buggy and Shanks worked together once. Yeah, they're holding him hostage, but the crew only sees that Crocodile and Mihawk work for Buggy. And sure, Buggy never met his father, but the world will only remember that he's the son of Rox. Just another thing to tack onto the board for our boy. Yet another person's success and infamy that Buggy can use as leverage to gain his followers' respect and cement his status as a great pirate himself. At the end of the day, there's a lot more to this character than meets the eye. If Shanks is the one carrying on Roger's vision for the world, Buggy is the one carrying the torch of Roger's pirate nature. He cares about wealth, fame, and power. He likes to party. He prides himself in being flashy. He's a bit of a clown, an incredibly lucky guy who always finds himself escaping danger unharmed. Yes, he's the comedic relief, but at the same time, it would be a mistake to expect nothing but jokes from Buggy. This man, just like any other, has his own goals, motivations, and dreams. And there's a bit of melancholy to this story. If I'm right about all this, Roger was essentially Buggy's adoptive father. He looked up to Roger. He wanted to be just like him. Roger was kind of his hero. But it was his older brother, Shanks, who inherited his will. Shanks was always the more competent one. Shanks was the one who got the straw hat. And when Roger died, Buggy deep down wanted to carry on his will, but couldn't, because he saw Shanks as the one who officially earned that right. And despite all this, despite Buggy taking the back seat, Shanks didn't want to pursue the One Piece. For some reason, Shanks wanted to wait around, and this infuriated Buggy. Buggy believed that it was only right to go find the One Piece just like Roger did. It was their duty as his successors. But Shanks, despite being given the hat and the preferential treatment and Roger's will, despite holding the torch, was not willing to run with it. In Buggy's eyes, this was unforgivable. It was an insult to all of his ambitions. It wasn't swallowing his devil fruit accidentally or losing his treasure map that made Buggy hate Shanks. What really made him hate Shanks was this moment. At least in his eyes, it was Shanks taking his position as Roger's successor for granted. It was a major disappointment to Buggy. He felt like, if you're not going to go on an adventure to find the greatest treasure in the world, if you're not going to live like he did, then you don't deserve to wear that hat. Maybe it's jealousy, maybe it's resentment, maybe it's grief, but that's probably why Buggy tried to destroy the hat when Luffy later brought it back in front of him. Buggy hated what that hat represented now. And later on, only after meeting Luffy, only after working together with him, was ironically the one to bring the hat back to Luffy at the end of the war. Maybe now he's finally begun to understand what Shanks had been waiting for, and now that Shanks is finally going after the treasure, and Luffy is too, Buggy wants to seize this opportunity to prove that he's also worthy, that he's not just a joke, that he's not just a cabin boy, that he believed in Roger as much, if not more, than the others, and wants to make the man who raised him proud. And so now, Buggy is setting his eyes on the prize he's wanted his whole life, the One Piece treasure. Thanks for stopping by the Hidden Island. I hope you guys enjoyed your stay today. Sorry this one took a while to make. I've had a lot of personal things happening in my life recently, and this script went through like 3 versions before I was happy with it. But it's done now, and next on the schedule is going to be another video, most likely covering all the Jolly Rogers in One Piece, a lot like the ships video I did, so look forward to that. If you enjoyed the video today, please do me a solid and like and subscribe to keep the music alive. Who do you think Buggy's parents are? Will we ever even find out? Does it really matter? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And most importantly, thanks for watching the show, because I sure enjoyed putting it on. Until next time, have a great day, a good night, and a wonderful romance dawn. Option number 3, Buggy's dad is Gastino.